the plug on the highly anticipated June 12th summit with North Korea. All this amid two classified briefings about the president's claims of informants inside his campaign. Hello, everyone. I'm Dana Perino, and this is the Daily Briefing. Anger and open hostility in recent comments from the North.
Well, many things can happen, and a great opportunity lies ahead potentially. I believe that this is a tremendous setback for North Korea and indeed a setback for the world.
This comes a few hours after the regime said it destroyed its nuclear test site, yet that's something experts believe was already unusable after a major earthquake last year. We have Fox team coverage. Greg Palkot is in Seoul, but we begin with Chief White House correspondent John Roberts. Busy day over there, John.
Oh, yeah, unlike other days here, Dana. Good afternoon to you. The president canceled the summit after the deputy foreign minister of North Korea, Cho Sun-hui, issued what White House officials said was a tantamount to a threat of nuclear war if the talks didn't go very well between the president, the White House believing that that's not the most productive position that North Korea could have taken ahead of the planned summit. So the president this morning sent a letter to Kim Jong-un to say, much as we would like to do it, it's off, though he did give him something to back into if he wanted to come back to the table. Cho also insulted the vice president, Mike Pence, calling him politically dumb, saying that recent statements from the vice president were, quote, stupid. But the White House says they hear that from North Korea all the time. That's not the reason why they canceled the summit. It was the nuclear threat that forced the president to pull the trigger. In his letter to Kim and in person in the Roosevelt Room a short time ago, the president alternately praised North Korea's leader, threatened him with nuclear destruction, and invited him to keep moving toward the table. Listen here.
I hope that we'll continue onward. We'll see. But we are in a very strong position. I think they want to do what's right. I really think that they want to do, and it was only recently that this has been taking place, and I think I understand why it's been taking place. But they want to do what's right. I really believe Kim Jong-un wants to do what's right. So hopefully things will work out.
You heard the president say there, I think I know what's taking place, and that is to change North Korea's attitude. The president was asked there in the Roosevelt Room about that. He said, well, I'm not going to say. But earlier this week, Tuesday, in the Oval Office, the president suggested that Kim's attitude changed after a second meeting that Kim had with Chinese President Xi Jinping in the port city of Dalian. The president suggesting that Xi might have gotten in his ear and said, look, I'm not sure you want to do this summit thing. And that's when he thinks that North Korean attitudes changed. North Korea is also been radio silent in any entreaties that were coming from the State Department about setting up the summit. The Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, on Capitol Hill earlier today and pushing back on the suggestion that the president canceled the summit because the White House wasn't ready for it. Listen here.
Over the past many days, we have endeavored to do what Chairman Kim and I had agreed was to put preparation teams together to begin to work to prepare for the summit. And we had received no response to our inquiries from them. So we, in addition to what the president laid out in his letter, it is also the case that I disagree with what you said in your opening statement. I think the American team's fully prepared. I think we're rocking. I think we're ready.
Where this goes from here likely depends on what Kim's reaction to the letter will be. It was about 10 o'clock at night Pyongyang time when the president transmitted it to him, so likely we won't hear anything from North Korea until later on today morning their time. If it's the typical North Korean knee-jerk reaction, Dana, a summit may never happen. But if Kim Jong-un considers that what the president's really saying here is you're not getting good information from Xi Jinping, it's much more in your interest to side with the United States than it is to side with China, well, maybe, just maybe, we'll hear something different from him.
All right.
We'll get to that event in a moment, but it is indeed late here in Seoul. We are now getting reaction from the South Korean government to the events of the past couple hours. South Korean President Moon Jae-in in special session with his national security staff urging direct talks between President Trump and Kim Jong-un, saying, I'm quoting here, denuclearization cannot be delayed or abandoned. The president here seemed to be a bit blindsided by events. He was, quote, quite perplexed by the statement coming from President Trump. He called it regrettable. Now, President Trump said that he spoke by phone with South Korean President Moon, including about military readiness in the region. That has got to be a bit of a blow to the South Korean. He's been working for months to get a diplomatic resolution of this crisis, including his own summit last month with Kim Jong-un along the DMZ. Again, the White House summit cancellation seems to stem from that statement coming from the Kim Jong-un regime, especially the reference to a quote-unquote Libya model option regarding North Korea. From our experience here, Pyongyang takes that phrase to mean regime change and hates it. Also getting the White House angry, that threat to go nuclear to nuclear in a showdown between the two countries. Understand also that President Trump spoke with Japanese President Abe, a firm ally in the region. And yes, now on to that event to the northeast of where we are. Ironically, this was supposed to be a day when the region moved closer to peace. North Korea claiming on Thursday it completely dismantled its nuclear test site up in the northeast corner of the country. Now, while foreign reporters were at the scene, they said there was an explosive closure of the tunnels there. There were no international experts confirming what was said. This was largely seen as a PR gesture in advance of that planned summit. Now, that summit for the moment is not to be. And yes, it is late here, Dana. We have not gotten any kind of reaction from North Korea. They have been better at reacting now than they have in the past. We might hear something on Friday. We will see. Back to you.
All right. And of course, then we'll be coming right back to you, Greg. Thank you. So to help us break it all down, Jamil Jaffer is a former senior advisor to the Senate Foreign Relations and House Intelligence Committees. Glad to have you here today. It had been a little disorienting to all of a sudden have Kim Jong-un be so cordial. And you know, he did release the American hostages, and it looked like we were full steam ahead. What do you know about the China angle here? And also, is it somewhat a little bit more comforting when you realize that, oh, this is the Kim Jong-un family that we know, and we have respect for the process, for the summit, but we're not going to go there and be snookered?
Well, that's right, Dana. Look, I mean, China obviously is the big player in the region. They are ultimately the backer of the North Korean regime. Without China, there is nothing from North Korea. They don't have any support. And so they're inclined to go where China tells them to go. And so it's interesting that his aggressive statements came after meeting with the Chinese leader. Not clear whether he asked the Chinese leader, look, I want to get a little more aggressive, or China said, maybe you need to be a little more aggressive. Either way, what you're seeing here, I think, is two leaders sort of, going toe-to-toe and saying, I can cancel, you can cancel, I can talk about nuclear war, so can you. And at the end of the day, while the tensions have heated up a little bit and the president cancels the summit, I bet you it's back on within 2 weeks.
Well, that's interesting. The president did leave the door open, certainly, for that. One thing about China that I'm curious about, every actor here that is involved, China, Japan, South Korea, the United States, and certainly North Korea, they're acting in their country's best interest. I don't understand, and maybe you could help me understand, why is it in China's interest for this summit not to go forward?
Well, look, I think at the end of the day, what's in China's interest is to have a North Korea that comes back into line and does the right thing here, but also a North Korea that is strong relative to South Korea, right? Because at the end of the day, what they see is they sort of view this in Cold War terms, right? The U.S. has its sphere of influence, South Korea. The China has its sphere of influence in North Korea, and they need to balance it off. And so if it looks like President Trump has got the upper hand, China say, look, we want you to back off a little bit. And actually, North Korea feels the same way. And so not clear whether this is China pulling the strings or whether it's North Korea reacting and saying to China, we want to go ahead and do this way. And China said, yep, that sounds fine to us.
Well, of course, anything the president does comes with some criticism from some parts of the country. Richard Haass, who we all know from foreign policy circles, he tweeted today, the summit was bound to fail as real Donald Trump administration badly overestimated what North Korea would agree to. The issue was and is U.S. willingness to accept an outcome short of total denuclearization. All or nothing foreign policy with North Korea, Iran, China. Trade risks producing nothing or conflict. But I wondered what you thought about this. I mean, you were obviously very instrumental in helping guide, at least on the Republican side, the members of Congress as President Obama moved forward on the Iran deal. And what sort of parallels do you see here?
Well, look, I mean, you can always talk about half measures. If you want a foreign policy of half measures, then that's fine. If you want incrementalism, that's fine. Clearly, Donald Trump is going for a big prize here. I mean, that comes at some cost. And so, look, everyone was sort of amazed that Donald Trump could pull off a big meeting like this. I think the meeting will still happen in the long run, but it's going to happen on America's terms. And I think that's actually the right way to negotiate. If it looks like we want it too much, like we did in the Iran deal, they'll continue to string you out and get a variety of concessions. And that's exactly what happened to Obama. And President Trump is saying that's not going to happen to me here.
Isn't the big issue here just what denuclearization means? I mean, Kim Jong-un thinks that he's in a much stronger position because he now has the weapons. And we are saying, no, you're going to have to give up the weapons if you want all the other things that the president has said could be good for your country. The definition of denuclearization, that's the real key here.
You're exactly right, Dana. That is exactly the key. And the challenge here is that Donald Trump might even have a different view of what denuclearization means, right? I think that obviously the U.S. position on that has long been no nuclear weapons on the Korean Peninsula, out completely. And Kim Jong-un might agree to that, but what he may mean is, well, I'll denuclearize when you denuclearize, which of course is an unsustainable scenario. And so we'll see what ends up being meant here. But that's part of why you want to get to a place where your diplomats are talking to one another and you have an understanding of the terms before you go into these negotiations.
Well, one thing that is very different is that before this whole process, before Mike Pompeo, the new Secretary of State, had gone over to North Korea, had actually met with him, we didn't have any sort of relationship. So that is different. And I think that you're right. It probably will take place at some point, maybe just not in 2 weeks. All right, Jamil, thank you.
Thanks, Dana.
We are keeping an eye outside that second Justice Department meeting on the alleged FBI informant targeting the Trump campaign. What will come out of it? Alert on two highly anticipated meetings in the Russia investigation, pulling back the curtain on revelations about the FBI's use of a potential informant inside the Trump campaign. The first with top intelligence officials ended an hour ago. Among the attendees included House GOP Committee Chairman Trey Gowdy and Devin Nunes, Democrat Adam Schiff, and White House Attorney Emmett Flood. The second meeting also involving congressional leaders in the so-called Gang of Eight. Bob Driscoll is a former Deputy Assistant Attorney General and now a managing partner in the D.C. office of McGlinchey Stafford. And we're glad to have you here, Bob.
Thanks, Dan.
While this has felt a little dramatic, okay, for the back and forth about the documents and who's going to get to see them and the briefing, as I understand it, and as I sort of remember, it's kind of a classic struggle between the branches, the executive branch and the Congress.
Right. I mean, this kind of negotiation goes on all the time, just usually at the staff level. I mean, Congress has the right to do oversight, and congressional oversight leads to transparency in the executive branch functioning, which is all fine. But similarly, the executive branch runs its own investigations and can't have, secret sources or methods they use or other information that's justifiably confidential exposed through congressional oversight. And so it's the kind of conversation, where do you draw that line? I think we all know, we can all think of extreme examples, but when you get right down to looking at a particular document, it's about categorizing that document, whether it is okay to be turned over or not. And so it's not resolved in court typically, it's resolved in exactly this type of negotiation.
For the Gang of Eight, that was the request yesterday from Pelosi and Schumer, saying, look, the Democrats, there is a process for this. The Gang of Eight exists. That was added yesterday. Wanted to ask you about the intel community, at least a former intel community, and what they said about the importance of this process. They said in a letter, when oversight activity is bipartisan, it can serve as an important check on government activity. Any effort to exclude one party or the other from sensitive counterintelligence oversight briefings threatens to undermine the oversight function and sends the wrong signal about the professional, non-political manner that must govern U.S. intelligence activities. How important do you think that is?
I think it's more important from a perception standpoint. I don't think it's very important legally at all, but I think perception-wise it does help. Although, frankly, with this whole investigation, I mean, that horse is so far out of the barn in terms of having a perception that this is nonpartisan that I'm not sure there's much we can do about it now. But I think that, it probably helps if both sides are there, and so things aren't mischaracterized, and there's not a fight over who said what. There's probably some benefit to having both sides there.
And these are classified briefings, so by law, nothing should leak out of them. We will see if that happens.
And Trump, by the way, the president could declassify anything he wanted.
Right.
I mean, that's the thing about being the head of the executive branch, makes this a little unusual.
But do you think he's being a little deferential to the Justice Department and saying, look, I know you got to do your thing, so I'm going to give you some room here to be able to run the process that you see as you see fit? Right.
Well, I think he's kind of having it both ways, fairly deftly, frankly, and that he's, through his use of Twitter, he's hammering the department to keep in the good graces of, the Freedom Caucus types. But at the end of the day, the fact that he hasn't declassified it or hasn't demanded it be released, which he could, they're all subordinate to him at DOJ, means that he is providing them some deference. I think he just wants to hold their feet to the fire, make sure they're not overbroad and holding things back.
If I could ask you one other thing, because this is another story, but now going to the Mueller investigation, okay? So the back and forth as to whether or not the president should do an interview. Rudy Giuliani had said he does not want his client, the president, to do an interview, but now he's saying he is open to considering the idea of a Trump-Mueller interview, and he says, basically his client wants to do it, and he wants to make his client happy. So where do you think this stands?
Well, I mean, I'm glad he's open to it. He has to be open to it. The president's his client. And, if you're a lawyer, at the end of the day, it's the client's call. I agree with the vast majority of lawyers that, I would never recommend the president do a voluntary interview at this stage from a strictly legal perspective. But the president's got broader political concerns to worry about as well. And he may disagree with that. But I think that given his penchant for a bit of overstatement or hyperbole at times, when these kind of interviews require precision answers, it wouldn't be a great dynamic for him.
But do you think, Bob, that the president thinks that if he goes ahead and does the interview, because he's maintained his innocence, that if he does the interview, that this will end?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, certainly Giuliani has said that publicly, and I think that may be driving the president's thinking is, hey, if I can sit down for 4 hours, I didn't do anything, so really what bad could come out of this, because there's nothing for me to, quote, lie about. I'll just do it, get it behind me, and I'll be done by September, as Giuliani has promised. But, I mean, the president has been promised this is ending before, by Ty Cobb, by Thanksgiving, then Christmas, then January. And so, and so that may be driving what he thinks, which, the lawyers may not agree with. But at the end of the day, we all have clients when you practice law, and he's the ultimate client that knows he's in charge.
All right. Bob Driscoll, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Dana.
So the Trump administration working to bring down the cost of prescription drugs. FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb joins me to explain how they're doing it despite opposition from some major pharmaceutical companies. It's taking aim at leading pharmaceutical companies as the Trump administration vows to lower the cost of prescription drugs. The FDA publicly calling out firms that block efforts to produce generic versions of many popular medications. Dr. Scott Gottlieb is Commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration. He joins me now. Thank you for being here. You were going to be on late last week, and because of the unfortunate, very sad situation in Texas, we weren't able to do this. But just last week, you made an announcement saying that the issue of getting drugs to generics is a high priority, and it's the best way to try to get the prices down. How was that action met in terms of reaction from the pharmaceutical companies?
Well, we've been taking a number of steps to try to bring more generic drug competition into the market across a range of different efforts. What we did last week was we published the names of companies where generic firms come to us telling us that they're having problems getting access to the doses of the branded company's drugs that they need in order to do clinical studies to get their generic drugs onto the market in the first place. So we know that sometimes branded companies adopt certain tactics where they make it hard for the generic firms to get the doses of drugs they need in order to run the studies that they need for generic approval. And now we're disclosing the names of the companies where the generic firms are having difficulty. So we published a list of about 50 different drugs where generic firms are having a hard time.
The Office of the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, says that the average citizen's prescription drug costs in 2015 in different countries, in the UK, $497, Canada, $807, the United States, a whopping $1,116. Do you think that if you were able to get more of these drugs to generics, that the United States commitment on that would dramatically decline?
Well, there's not a silver bullet here. There's no single solution. But I think trying to get more drug competition into the market is going to have an impact on the pricing. It's not just generic drugs. It's also branded drugs. Trying to make sure that when a branded drug gets approved, getting the second or third version of that drug onto the market also is an efficient process so that you have price competition. And people who have monopolies don't have them in perpetuity.
Let me ask you about one other thing. The Congress has passed, the House has passed the Right to Try bill. Take a listen to President Trump on that the other day.
Right to Try passed. We'll be signing it probably sometime next week. And this gives people hope. We can go, they'll sign a waiver, and they'll be able to use what they need. And in many cases, they'll be helped.
This has been a big priority for some for a long time. Do you think it will have an impact on people that are seeking some sort of hope in their trials?
We think it would. We have a longstanding commitment to trying to provide promising drugs to patients who are out of options, who have terminal conditions. We do a good job of that. We get a lot of drugs to people who are facing long odds, fatal diseases, terminal diseases. We think this is going to be another vehicle that patients are going to be able to use to get access to products in certain situations, and we're looking forward to implementing it.
Let me ask you about another topic that is sure to get some attention if it does spread, and that is the issue of Ebola. We know that in Congo there have been a couple of cases that have come up. I know that the forces there, the health care forces, are trying to contain it. What sort of risks do we have here in the United States if this does not stay contained?
Well, I think the risk to us right now in the U.S. is minimal, but we're not out of the woods with respect to the DRC. There are some cases that have popped up there that aren't unaccounted for, meaning that we haven't been able to trace back how the people got the infection. So that leads open to question that there may be some additional people who are going to come down with Ebola there. There are additional people who are infected. But we've really had a paradigm change with respect to how we approach this. We've gone from a posture of containment to one where we're now able to offer people treatment and protection with a new vaccine.
How is that able to get to the people there? I know distribution of this type of vaccine is sometimes difficult in Africa.
And this one in particular, because it has to be kept in a very cold temperature. So they've been able to do it. They've been able to get the vaccine into the major city. They got about up to 8,000 doses in, and there's many more doses that they could bring in if they have to. So they've been able to bring in the logistics to get that vaccine distributed to people who've been in contact with some of those who've been infected.
All right, FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks a lot.
President Trump set to present a former Navy SEAL with the Medal of Honor. We'll bring that when it happens. We'll bring that to you live. Plus, is the NFL letting politics affect and cancel the North Korea summit? The president saying the U.S. military is ready to respond, if necessary, to any foolish or reckless acts by the rogue nation. National security correspondent Jennifer Griffin joins us. Jennifer, what is the Pentagon saying about North Korea?
Well, Dana, the Pentagon chief spokesman says Defense Secretary Mattis spoke to the president today, adding the U.S. military is in no greater heightened vigilance.
We are still continuing the maximum pressure campaign. That hasn't changed for us. So in terms of we are ready to fight tonight, that's always been the case.
We're at our level of good readiness. We're in a boxer stance. We're ready to respond. We'll see what develops over the next few days.
Dana White said Mattis was always cautiously optimistic about the talks. Dana?
Jennifer, what can you tell us about the Medal of Honor recipient that is going to be honored by the president just moments from now?
Well, we sat down with him this week. Master Chief Britt Slabinski, a 26-year Navy veteran and member of SEAL Team 6. He is being recognized for his actions on March 4th, 2002 during Operation Anaconda while trying to insert a SEAL team on top of Takur Ghar Mountain to set up an observation post. The mission faced problems from the start. 7 U.S. service members were killed, 5 on the rescue team sent in to extract the SEALs. The team helicopter was shot as it landed. Petty Officer Neil Roberts fell out of the helicopter, which later crash-landed. At that point, Britt Slabinski, who was team leader, took the difficult decision to return to the mountaintop, knowing they were outgunned and outnumbered. Roberts, they believed, was still alive. Lots of heroics that day, including the Army Special Operations helicopter pilot Alan Mack, who volunteered to fly back in after his first helicopter took fire. But there were also a series of tragic events. Dana?
Jennifer, then why is this Medal of Honor more controversial than usual?
Well, the incident at what's now known as Roberts Ridge has led to a lot of churn in the special ops community. The Quick Reaction Force did not know that 2 previous helicopters had been fired upon. There are questions about why Slabinski broke military protocol and landed a helicopter on their objective rather than walk in. Air Force Sergeant John Chapman, who returned to find Navy SEAL Roberts, was shot immediately when they got out of the helicopter and left for dead. New evidence suggests he may have survived. He's also up for the Medal of Honor. The failed rescue mission has led to recriminations within the special ops community that they may have left someone behind. What's clear about this incident is there were mistakes made up and down the chain of command. The ceremony at the White House today could close this chapter or open new wounds. We'll have our exclusive interview with Britt Slabinski, the latest Medal of Honor recipient, tonight at 6 and 11 p.m. Dana?
All right, Jennifer, thank you. Meantime, reaction is pouring in after yesterday's announcement that the NFL will require players to stand during the national anthem, but allow them to stay in the locker room if they want to opt out. President Trump, who has been critical of players kneeling, approving of the new policy during an interview this morning on Fox.
Well, you shouldn't be playing. You shouldn't be there. Maybe you shouldn't be in the country. You have to stand proudly for the national anthem. And the NFL owners did the right thing if that's what they've done. I think the people pushed it forward. This was not me. I brought it out. I think the people pushed it forward.
Many players are critical of the new policy, including Seattle Seahawks wide receiver Doug Baldwin.
The NFL cares about one thing, and that's the NFL. That's the NFL's bottom line. It just felt like, again, there was a lack of understanding. And to me, this just further punctuates the tone deafness or the disconnect between the NFL and its players.
So that's the NFL decision, and of course we'll have more on that soon. President Trump arriving in the East Room, where he will be overseeing the Medal of Honor recipient day. We'll go to him now.
Almighty God, we come before you on this very special occasion from different backgrounds and cultures and expressions of faith toward you. But we all come as Americans and those who love her. Those who have sacrificed for her, who have bled for her, and who have died for her. Today, as we gather in our nation's most sacred home, we have the privilege to witness, to celebrate, and to honor an extraordinary naval career and a life that has been set apart and called to service and devotion to this nation and those in it. Today, we are among the most privileged to watch as our nation's highest honor of special trust, achievement, and fidelity is both given and received from our nation's commander-in-chief to a leader of naval warriors whose opinion was sought, whose sacrifices were selfless, and whose dedication to duty is unparalleled by any standard. Today, we lift up and honor our very own Master Chief, Britt Sablinski, as our nation's Medal of Honor is bestowed upon him. May he also take with him the absolute certainty in knowing that his day is given to this great nation, to our beloved Navy, and to the warriors of naval special warfare were of value beyond measure. We as his fellow Americans, brother and sister warriors, friends and family alike, collectively ask for your blessing upon our great president, this great naval warrior, these great military families, and all they do, have done, and will continue to do from this day forward. On this most solemn occasion, on this sacred ground, we as his teammates say, well done. And finally, whether swimming the depths, climbing the highest of mountains, or soaring through the heavens, as we walk that lonely road of faith, may you always go with us. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Thank you very much, Chaplain. That's beautiful. And thank you to Deputy Secretary of Defense Patrick Shanahan. Thank you, Patrick. Today we pay tribute to Britt's heroic service, and we proudly present him with our nation's highest military honor, and I would go so far as to say our nation's highest honor. Joining Britt today is his son, Bryce. Bryce, thank you very much. A rising senior at a wonderful school known to the world as Ohio State. Great place. That's a great school. Along with Britt's sisters, Brenda and Tika, and Brenda's husband, Tom. Thank you very much for being here. Here as well are Britt's significant other, Christina, and her two children, John and Megan, who we just met in the Oval Office. That's a special place, too. Thank you all for joining us for this really special day and special ceremony. Thank you very much. Finally, we're honored to be joined by several previous Congressional Medal of Honor recipients. Would you please stand? Would you please stand? Thank you, friends. Very, very special people. Your names and your immortal acts of valor are forever engraved in the memory of our nation. Our nation will always be grateful to you, and you know that. Today, we induct a new name into the world's most exclusive gathering of heroes, and that's exactly what it is. Britt was raised in Northampton, Massachusetts. He became an Eagle Scout by the age of 14. His father was a veteran who served as a frogman in the underwater demolitions group of the U.S. Navy. It was a tough people. While Britt was in junior high, his dad brought him to their reunion. Britt was inspired by their bond of friendship, their stories of service, and their boundless love of country. As soon as he graduated from high school in 1988, Britt enlisted in the Navy to become a SEAL. That means he is a physically very strong person, and that also means he is a mentally very strong person. That's tough. Throughout the grueling months of training, Britt proved himself every single step of the way. In 1990, he graduated the legendary BUD/S training course, and he earned that special badge worn only by the bravest few, the SEAL Trident. In 2002, Britt was called to support Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan. In the late evening hours of March 3rd that year, he led an elite team on a combat mission to establish a secure position on the peak of a 10,000-foot mountain known as Takur Ghar. Britt and his teammates were preparing to exit the helicopter onto the mountain when their aircraft was struck by a machine gun and machine gun fire like they've never seen before, and a rocket-propelled grenade from al-Qaeda terrorists down below. Not a good feeling. As the helicopter lurched away from the assault, Petty Officer First Class Neil Roberts was flung out of the aircraft. Tremendous, tremendous, horrible thing to witness. And onto the side of the mountain before the helicopter crashed into the valley below. After surviving barely the violent crash, Britt and his team were retrieved by a second helicopter, also, by the way, piloted by very brave people. At this point, Britt received information suggesting their comrade, Neil Roberts, the man thrown out of the helicopter, was probably still alive. The team faced a choice: to wait for reinforcements and pretty much safety, or to return immediately to the enemy stronghold in the hope of saving Neil's life. They would be outmanned, outgunned, and fighting uphill on a steep, icy mountain, and every soldier knows you don't want to fight uphill. They learned that at Gettysburg. You don't fight uphill. But they would face freezing temperatures and bitter winds at the highest altitude of battle in the history of the American military. This was the highest point where we ever fought. The odds were not good. They were not in their favor. But Britt and his team didn't even hesitate for a moment. They made their decision. For them, it was an easy one. They went back to that mountain. When their helicopter reached the mountain peak, they jumped out into a furious onslaught of machine gun fire like none of them had ever seen before. Britt and his teammate, Sergeant John Chapman, charged uphill toward the enemy, where John was shot after clearing a bunker. Britt continued to engage the enemy, repeatedly exposing himself to horrendous fire. Two of his other teammates, Stephen Turbo Tobas and Brett Morganti, both suffered very, very serious leg injuries. Britt helped them to safety and called in airstrikes as continuous fire drove them ever further down the face of the mountain, got worse and worse, more and more dangerous. He kept going. In a treacherous descent, Britt and his men carried Turbo through the snow. At one point, they fashioned a makeshift harness out of their gun straps to hoist Turbo down a 13-foot cliff. In itself, treacherous, because if you miss that little area, they go down the mountain. There's no stopping them. When they could go no further, Britt tended to the wounded and coordinated their escape until his team was finally evacuated from enemy territory. 7 of the brave men who fought with Britt are here with us today, and maybe they'll stand up as I call their name. Petty Officer, 2nd Class, Brett Morgante. Pretty dangerous place, huh? Way to go, Brett. Chief Warrant Officer, Kyle Soderberg. Thank you, Kyle. Petty Officer, 2nd Class, Stephen Tobaz. Thanks, Stephen. Chief Warrant Officer, Al Mack. Thank you. Sergeant Christopher Cunningham. Master Sergeant Eric Stebner, a Master Chief Petty Officer, still on active duty, is quietly not with us today. I just want to thank you all. Unbelievable acts of bravery. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Incredible. Today, we also remember the brave soldiers who gave their lives on that mountain. Technical Sergeant John Chapman, Corporal Matthew Commons, Specialist Mark Anderson, Sergeant Bradley Cross, Senior Airman Jason Cunningham, Technical Sergeant Philip Spivak, and of course, Petty Officer 1st Class Neil Roberts, who met a horrible death, for whom these events are now known. It's called the Battle of Roberts Ridge. Incredible event. To the Gold Star family members of those heroes who are here today, please stand up. Please stand up. Please. It's an honor to have you accept our nation's profound sorrow and a deep love and everlasting gratitude. These were incredible, incredible men, and you can be proud that they were in your family, and they are looking down right now, and they are very, very proud of you. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Thank you. To Britt and to all of the men of Roberts Ridge, you waged a fierce fight against the enemies. And these really have become the enemies of America and the enemies of all civilization. Through your actions, you demonstrated that there is no love more pure and no courage more great than the love and courage that burns in the hearts of American patriots. We are free because warriors like you are willing to give their sweat, their blood, and if they have to, their lives for our great nation. Britt, you went on to serve many more years in the U.S. Navy before finally retiring in 2014. Today, he continues his life of serving by volunteering with the Navy SEAL Foundation and on behalf of Gold Star families, special, incredible families. And as one of his fellow service members testifies, he is an amazing father to Bryce, who, like his dad, is now an Eagle Scout. Britt wants the country to know that for him, the recognition he is about to receive is an honor that falls on the whole team. He wants you folks to know that, on the whole team, on every American warrior who fought the forces of terror on that snowy Afghan ridge. Each of them has entered the eternal chronicle of American valor and American bravery. Britt, we salute you. We thank you. We thank God for making you a United States SEAL. We love our Navy SEALs. They're very special, very incredible people. It's now my tremendous privilege to present to you the Congressional Medal of Honor. And I'd like the military aide to come forward and please read the citation. Thank you.
The President of the United States, in the name of the Congress, takes pleasure in presenting the Medal of Honor to Senior Chief Special Warfare Operator, Sea, Air, and Land, Britt K. Slabinski, United States Navy, for service as set forth in the following: for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty, while assigned to a joint task force in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. In the early morning of March 4th, 2002, Senior Chief Special Warfare Operator Slabinski led a reconnaissance team to its assigned area atop a 10,000-foot snow-covered mountain. Their insertion helicopter was suddenly riddled with rocket-propelled grenades and small arms fire from previously undetected enemy positions. The crippled helicopter lurched violently and ejected one teammate onto the mountain before the pilots were forced to crash land in the valley far below. Senior Chief Slabinski boldly rallied his 5 remaining team members and marshaled supporting assets for an assault to rescue their stranded teammate. During reinsertion, the team came under fire from 3 directions, and one teammate started moving uphill toward an enemy strongpoint. Without regard for his own safety, Senior Chief Slabinski charged directly toward enemy fire to join his teammate. Together, they fearlessly assaulted and cleared the first bunker they encountered. The enemy then unleashed a hail of machine gun fire from a second hardened position only 20 meters away. Senior Chief Slabinski repeatedly exposed himself to deadly fire to personally engage the second enemy bunker and orient his team's fires in the furious close-quarters firefight. Proximity made air support impossible, and after several teammates became casualties, the situation became untenable. Senior Chief Slabinski maneuvered his team to a more defensible position, directed airstrikes in very close proximity to his team's position, and requested reinforcements. As daylight approached, accurate enemy mortar fire forced the team further down the sheer mountainside. Senior Chief Slabinski carried a seriously wounded teammate through deep snow and led a difficult trek across precipitous terrain while calling in fire on the enemy, which was engaging the team from the surrounding ridges. Throughout the next 14 hours, Senior Chief Slabinski stabilized casualties and continued the fight against the enemy until the hill was secured and his team was extracted. By his undaunted courage, bold initiative, leadership, and devotion to duty, Senior Chief Slabinski reflected great credit upon himself and upheld the highest traditions of the United States Naval Service.
And as we close today, let us close with one final prayer. Let us pray. Almighty God, those of us who have had the privilege to witness this very special ceremony are reminded once again that we serve among the greatest of warriors, among the greatest of navies, within the greatest of nations, only because of the brave few who continue to raise their hand in the protection of this great nation and those in it from those who would wish us harm. Men such as our very own Master Chief Britt Sablinski, who personifies that most cherished of virtues that we all strive for, which is courage. Courage for when our moment comes and we look into the abyss and we promise ourselves and others on our honor to do our best, to do our duty for God and for our country, and in so doing forge an unbreakable bond in the heat of battle in the furnace of affliction, which strengthens, molds, and galvanizes that bond only to come forth as pure gold, and in this case, gold in the form of a naval trident. And as we close this ceremony today, may Master Chief Sablinski take with him the certainty and knowing that his days spent in service to this nation and the pursuit of freedom for all were of value beyond measure, as well as those virtues and values which delivered him to this very moment. May it never be far from our thoughts the price that he and many others have paid in the pursuit of that freedom. And may that inspiration be breathed into each one of us and live on in those in the generations to follow, especially to our brother and sister warriors, teammates, friends, and family of Naval Special Warfare, as we collectively wish our teammate and his family Godspeed. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain in your seats until the President has departed the East Room.
What an amazing and moving ceremony today, honoring retired Navy SEAL Britt Sablinski with the Congressional Medal of Honor, the highest honor that he could get. I'm joined by Michael Meehan. He's a former Chief of Staff to Democratic Senator Maria Cantwell, and Colin Reed is a Senior Vice President of Definers Public Affairs. We were going to have a debate about politics, but we're not going to do that because there's a special connection, not just the United States celebrating Britt Sablinski today, but Massachusetts. And both of you are from Massachusetts. And I'll let you say just a few words in the minute or so that we have left. Colin, I'll start with you.
Yeah, Dana, well, in a city that's too often filled with rancor and insults, it's refreshing to see moments like that about the things that really matter. And I know even more so for people like Michael and me when they're from Massachusetts like we are. So it was just a really nice moment to see.
Amazing, too, Michael, when you think of, we're headed into Memorial Day weekend where we remember the people who served our country and gave the ultimate sacrifice, and it's appropriate to honor somebody like Britt Sablinski who tried to save their lives. Your thoughts?
Well, born and raised in Massachusetts, like the Navy SEAL, 250 years ago, Massachusetts was the home of the original Patriots, and so to see this man continue that great tradition and be honored in such a way is very moving for me today.
Indeed. Well, we'll have you back to talk politics, but today, not a time for that. A reminder, Jennifer Griffin's interview with Medal of Honor recipient Master Chief Britt Sablinski airs on Special Report at 6 p.m. tonight, so you won't want to miss that. Thanks for joining us, everyone. I'm Dana Perino, and Trace Gallagher is in for Shepard Smith, and he'll have a lot more in just a moment.